I've always enjoyed the idea of taking Earth's mightiest hero out of their own story. For instance, how would the people of Metropolis defend against Lex Luthor's tyranny if Superman never landed in Smallville? Well, maybe Lex would never even become a villain. Doomsday certainly would never be created, and the same in many cases is true for the villains of Dragon Ball if Goku never landed on Mount Paozu. But that's not to say that the heroes are the ones who create their villains. Sure, in a lot of cases that is true, although there are just as many where the villains already exist and the heroes are the only ones capable of stopping them. The Earth without Goku is an idea I've wanted to toy around with for quite some time, although sadly for our little ball of dirt, it's not going to be entirely free of Kakarot. This is the story of what if Goku was in Vegeta's squad. Planet Vegeta has just been destroyed by none other than the Emperor Frieza, who believed that one day the Super Saiyan would emerge and challenge his right to rule over the universe with the same iron fist he has for so long. It might have just been an old wives' tale of a species now bordering on extinction, although it was still enough for Frieza to fear for his own life, and thus through self-preservation, he committed genocide. But on a planet far away, there were still a couple of survivors, Saiyans who had their lives spared, mostly because a large majority of them were children. There was Prince Vegeta, who was probably the strongest of his race at this point, as well as Raditz and Kakarot, who were actually twins in this alternate universe. You might think having an extra person there to help complete missions faster would mean that everything would be a lot easier on the group, although because of how weak Kakarot was, at least compared to the rest of his teammates, two of the older Saiyans we saw in the Broly movie alongside Nappa actually didn't survive here. This isn't a huge change in the grand scheme of things, since these two did die before we ever see them do anything important, although it does change the way that Goku sees himself, as well as the appearance he has to the rest of his group. He's dead weight, and the only reason they even keep him around is because he's another Saiyan, a similar situation to what Raditz was in the original story, although instead it shifted onto Kakarot, whereas Raditz is looked on more fondly by his other two teammates. It's not a huge change since he was still a weakling, although it means he had a much easier childhood, and thus isn't as much of an egotistical douche. Unlike his other three teammates though, Goku chooses to improve himself. When faced with criticism, instead of backing down and getting beaten into a corner, Goku bites back. And even though this does get him beaten to near death multiple times by Nappa and Vegeta, he does still come back even stronger. But not just in the way of Zenkais and power boosts. Instead, it also helps to build his mental fortitude, his drive to never give up and always be better. By the time he and his brother, about 10 years old, Goku would be dissatisfied with his own power. He's about as strong as Raditz now thanks to his many close encounters with death, although he isn't pleased with how weak he is compared to Nappa and Vegeta. He's come to understand the Saiyan hierarchy, and that because Vegeta is an elite warrior, he will always be superior to the low-class scum. But even though he understands this, he doesn't accept it. He doesn't believe that it's possible that just because of who you were born to, you have no way of rising up the ranks. The sort of training we see in Z, where Goku has weighted armor and is training in gravity chambers, might be off the table for now, although he would still begin doing regular exercises, as well as taking on more work during missions. This serves a dual purpose. Not only is he trying to improve himself, he's also trying to prove himself to Nappa and Vegeta. For his entire life, he's been called dead weight and told he doesn't really serve any purpose. If anything, he gets in the way, and that is just not something Goku is going to sit back and take. Even when his brother was being beaten to near death, Raditz would never stand up for him, because he didn't want that kind of aggression to go on him. Ultimately, Raditz was a coward. Any chance he had to avoid conflict, he would take. He didn't want to get wrapped up in anything he didn't have to, and this is one of the reasons his power level would stay so low for so long. But he doesn't have that moment of realization that Goku does, so he doesn't try and better himself or improve in any way. He just stays stagnant, not only power-wise, but also character-wise. Already, he's slightly better than he was in the original, but he is still nowhere near a good person on any metric. Don't get me wrong, the Saiyans are still monsters here, Goku included. Although when I say Raditz is a bad person and a bad character, I don't mean morality-wise. I'm referring to how he is wimpy and cowardish. That might be lesser than it is in the original, although it is still definitely a prominent character trait. He's an unappealing character to watch and be around, so even his own twin brother would begin to distance himself from Raditz. But even though he's the weakest member of his group and nobody likes him, Raditz puts in no effort to change, much unlike Goku. So instead, he just gets by and everybody else is forced to put up with him. For years, we would see the same pattern continue. Goku would be looked down upon by everybody around him and choose to get better, get stronger, improve, whereas Nappa and Vegeta would stay stagnant in their own power, although somehow always ahead of Goku. A rope that no matter how high Kakarot climbs up, the end is always just out of sight. Once entering his teenage years, anytime that Nappa, Vegeta, and Raditz would go out and spend the money they make on missions, Goku would continue working, sometimes taking up jobs on his own, or even with the likes of Zarbon and Dodoria. He would quickly become Frieza's favorite little monkey, as anytime the rest of his squad is going on lavish vacations, wasting all the money the Frieza Force pays them on food, women, and drinks aplenty, while Goku continues to go out working harder and harder, which is something that Frieza admires. He doesn't understand exactly why Kakarot does it, although it is still something that he takes advantage of, sending Goku on all sorts of different missions that his other recruits just aren't strong enough to handle. Goku might be nothing compared to Vegeta, although he is still incredibly powerful. His base form power level is 3,500, which on its own isn't too impressive, but once he enters Great Ape, he's a Ginyu Force level threat. In fact, it would only be a matter of time until Goku is called in to join the legendary team. Nah.
Why, forgive him, Lord Frieza. He doesn't understand to whom he speaks.
Oh no, I do. I get you guys are really strong and I'd love to grow alongside you, but I'm just not really for the whole team-up thing, you know? I'm only with the other guys because I have been for as long as I can remember, but not super eager to join another team.
Why, you?
Ginyu, we're all friends here. There's no point in getting so worked up. It was simply a gracious offer he can refuse if he wishes. Bring in Guldo, will you? He was the one with the wacky powers, wasn't he?
Of course, Lord Frieza. And, yes, Lord Frieza.
As for you, Kakarot, was it? I already had a solo mission prepared in case you didn't want to accept. Head to a planet Viltrum right away.
Of course, Lord Frieza.
Off you go now. You have no idea just how important you will be soon. Goku would grow vastly more powerful while going on odd jobs by himself, as well as accompanying the other Saiyans on their usual missions. Eventually, Nappa would become suspicious of Kakarot, since it's not very Saiyan-like to not partake when your comrades go out for grub, especially since there's no real point in going on missions if you're not going to spend the money you make on food, drinks, and women, at least in Nappa's mind. Although Vegeta would counter this by saying that Kakarot is now just more entwined with his battle spirit than he was in his younger years. It's only natural that now that he's stronger, he'd want to go out and fight rather than indulge himself with pleasantries. Honestly, Vegeta feels the same, but since he doesn't have that same underdog-type motivation, he's fine taking some time to relax every now and again. I hate jumping through these characters' lives and skipping over so much possible content, although if I'm being real, nothing eventful would happen for quite some time. I guess I could cover what's going on Earth, although I doubt that'd be a super happy story. So let's focus back in on Goku and Co. after a couple of years pass. Both Raditz and his twin brother Kakarot are now full-fledged adults. meaning they can go on the most dangerous of dangerous missions in the Frieza Force. Not that they weren't already doing this, but now it's completely moral. Well, moral might not be the best word since their job is still genocide, but considering child labor isn't a factor, it is better, right? Either way, they have both increased their strength many times over. Raditz with a power level of 3,500, approaching what Nappa's was before they started going on more dangerous missions, which is also why Raditz saw this boost in strength. Shockingly enough though, Goku's actually more than double that at a power level of 8,000, which is even higher than Nappa's is currently, so he no longer feels like the lowest of the low since he's surpassed the oldest member of their group. Not to say that the other two haven't seen gains as well, as Nappa would be at a power level of 7,000, not too far behind, and Vegeta has soared up to 20,000, meaning that once he enters Grade Ape, he is by far the strongest member of Frieza's army. Speaking of the big, horny man himself, Frieza would give the Saiyan Quartet a while off from their regular missions, saying that he has something special planned for them, which he needs them to be in tip-top shape for. For the first couple of days, they would try and relax as they usually would before a big mission. Although, as more time started to pass, Goku and Nappa would begin to get antsy, so since they were in a similar strength group, they would begin to spar. As a couple of days turned into a week, and 1 week into 2, eventually turning into an entire month, Nappa and Goku would continue sparring, and after each session of beating each other to death, they would go into the healing pods, getting a bit of a Zenkai boost. Even after such a relatively short time, both would grow to power levels of 10 to 11,000. Which would get Vegeta thinking. The power level you were born with meant so much to the Saiyans, although Goku has gone from 2 to surpassing every other Saiyan aside from maybe the King. Yet he still continues to grow stronger and stronger. He is not satisfied, and in a weird way, Vegeta feels the same. He's the strongest Saiyan in recorded history. Hell, he's one of the strongest beings in the entire universe once he goes into Grade Ape. So why isn't he satisfied with his power? Well, for the same reason Goku isn't. It's not like he wants to be the strongest. No, he just wants to be better than he is. This might be a lesson taught at the Turtle School, although it's also something baked into Saiyan's DNA. They have this urge for strength. They have this primal sort of lust for battle. And it can't be satisfied by just taking over worlds and fighting warriors by the dozen. They have to have a worthy challenger, somebody to push them to grow past their current limits. And that's what Nappa and Vegeta were for Goku for so long. Nappa experienced it firsthand once Kakarot surpassed him, although Vegeta is just now picking up on it. Sadly though, just after he does, the call for action finally starts ringing, and they have to go on the big mission that Frieza was preparing them for. They're tasked to meet up with Zarbon, Dodoria, and the Ginyu Force. The first two is no problem at all, although Goku is a little worried about the Ginyus. He feels it'll be a little awkward since he hasn't exactly told his current teammates that he refused to join their elite squadron. Thankfully though, this would never get brought up, as nobody wanted to tell Guldo he wasn't exactly their first option. The three groups would begin to converse, until finally the Saiyans ask what exactly they're being sent to do. To which Ginyu would explain that they're going to take down the Galactic Patrol. Zarbon would then add on that this organization was a sort of rival to the Frieza Force, doing the exact opposite of their work. Instead of taking over planets, they were defending them, in large part against the Frieza Force. This was obviously bad for business, so Frieza sent the best of the best to handle it, which is why they're all here. Unknowingly to everybody there was a bit of ulterior motives on Frieza's side, wanting to test the capabilities of the Saiyans. But aside from that, it was pretty much just that these were all the strongest members of Frieza's army, and he needed a job taken care of. The reason it took so long for the mission to start was because they were waiting for a time when a moon would be fully visible from the Galactic Patrol headquarters. That way, the Saiyans could activate their Great Ape state and be at their most effective. Otherwise, even their strongest member would be under the likes of Dodoria, which frankly just wouldn't cut it. Or at least, that's what they thought. Although after arriving to the Galactic Patrol headquarters, even the so-called Galactic King would be no match. Ginyu would take him out with a single attack, and Vegeta would kill the majority of their elite soldiers while in Great Ape. Honestly, this was overkill. But Frieza had no idea how strong this so-called super advanced organization really was. We can assume that Maris wouldn't be a part of it by this point, so yeah, the good guys lose. And it wouldn't even be hard either. The best estimate we have for the average soldier in the Galactic Patrol is Jocko. And sure, by Resurrection F, he was taking Frieza's soldiers out by the dozen, but even then, compared to Great Ape Vegeta, that's just not impressive. However, like I said, this was only supposed to be a test, seeing just how strong the Saiyans really are. It's the only reason the Ginyu, Zarbon, and Dodoria even came along. That way they could report back to Frieza, saying how powerful the Saiyans had gotten. They would report back saying that the Galactic Patrol fell with absolute ease. Their prisons were also disposed of. Anybody inside there that did not align with the Frieza Force was swiftly taken out. Even the likes of Moro was dispatched of easily because they didn't have access to their powers. This might sound strange since Moro is only contained because they didn't have anybody strong enough to kill him, but their strongest warriors were the likes of Jocko. So yeah, Ginyu can handle it. Other than that though, the report mostly just says that the Saiyans are strong, really strong. In fact, Vegeta now could probably take down the whole Ginyu force rather than just having surpassed their leader. And honestly, the likes of Nappa and Kakarot aren't too far behind either. So give it another year or two and they just might be strong enough for the plan that Frieza has in mind. As taking down the Galactic Patrol was only the first step towards universal domination.